So we're back in business. Welcome. This should be a very interesting presentation. If you're new to Forum, my name is Kathy Hebers. There are 4 of us that do the Forum programs. We're each assigned a week. Judy on files, Phoebe Benziger in the back, and Barbara Bynum. And we're always open to suggestions for new topics. So if there's something you would like to know more about, please let us know. We'll work to get them lined up. Also, if you're not on our email, we have cards that show you how to get on our email, and I'll be happy to give you one of those at the end. Today we're honored to have Bryan Cashion. Bryan is the president of the Black Canyon Astronomical Society.
Not astrological.
No, and not astronomy. It's astronomical. A group whose primary mission is to unite and stimulate the energy, public interest, and knowledge of astronomy in Southwest Colorado, including preservation of dark skies, which is why we're here today. Bryan is almost a Colorado native. He came at age 6 months to the eastern slope, grew up here, and then went to California for your bachelor's, and where for your master's and doctorate?
Gunnison. Go Tigers.
So he has quite an educational background. He spent 30 years with ExxonMobil as an environmental engineer. And when he retired in 2008, he returned to Colorado and settled in Montrose. And that's kind of a fun story. Bryan and his wife, they were in Houston. They were traveling around Colorado and spent one unexpected night in Montrose and went, this is it. This is what we're looking for. I always wonder what brings people to Montrose. And in Bryan's case, it was fly fishing. But you so often hear the story of somebody's on the ski lift or somebody's driving through town and they just go, this is it. So he is now in Montrose. His interest in astronomy began here when he attended a solar session sponsored by the Society. And when I was reading online, it said in 2012 he missed a meeting and became president. So that's what brings him to us today, president of the Black Canyon Society. And he's got a great slideshow. This should be really informative. We're happy to have him. Please join me in welcoming Bryan.
How's that? Can everybody hear me? Okay. Welcome to the forum. I'm glad you could come. Before we actually get started, I've got a couple of things I want to mention. One is that, as usual, we'll hold questions till the end of the talk so that we can pass the microphone around the room. That way everybody gets to hear the question, and they also, the recording system picks up the questions. So hold your questions till the end. The second thing is, you'll see a number of websites throughout the presentation. I don't expect you to write those down. At the end, the last page will be all of those websites plus some others with a QR code if you want to come up and snap it with your phone, or you can get the QR code off of this that will be here on the desk. Then you'll get your own list of all those websites, and they're linkable in what you download. So going to start out just kind of set the tone here with a brief video called Losing the Dark from Dark Sky International. Some of you may have seen this. It's about 6 minutes long. And just about everything that's in this video, we're going to dig into more detail as we go beyond.
We live on the surface of a planet, spinning on its axis once every 24 hours. Its rhythms of day and night are embedded in the biological makeup of all life. During the day, we bathe in the glow of the sun. As night approaches, darkness takes over. It's a time to rest, to rejuvenate, to marvel at the beauty of the night. Until just over a century ago, our night skies were very dark. Now, even the wilderness is invaded by light. Our cities glow at night. Buildings are lit up. Unshielded lights blind us as we travel along our streets and roads. All these artificial lights overpower the darkness. The waste of energy is obvious, even from space. Much of that yellow glare the astronauts see comes from streetlights. They produce most of the light pollution on the planet. The glare is scattered by the atmosphere, creating sky glows over the landscape. We are losing the dark of night at the speed of light. Light pollution threatens the health of every living thing on Earth. Lights at night disrupt plant growth. Unshielded lights contribute to the deaths of countless land and sea animals each year. Migrating birds crash into illuminated buildings. Newly hatched sea turtles mistake the glow of electric lights for the shimmer of the ocean's surface. Bright lights at night also directly affect humans. Drivers and pedestrians temporarily blinded by poorly designed lights have suffered tragic accidents. Light pollution poses a silent threat to our health. Exposure to light at night disrupts the circadian rhythms that regulate our sleep cycles. People working at night under bright lights or living in light-polluted cities face a higher risk of developing diseases such as breast and prostate cancer. Here is a night sky with typical light pollution. On a good night, only the brighter stars and planets pierce the glow. This is what the night sky might look like if we could remove the light pollution. That faint band of light stretching across the sky is the Milky Way, our home galaxy. Because of light pollution, many people have never seen it. Astronomers know all too well the problems caused by lighting up the night. They need clear, dark skies to study the many fascinating objects in the universe. Light pollution simply washes out their view of the cosmos. Lighting up the night sky wastes money and fossil fuels. To keep a 100-watt light bulb turned on every night for a year takes the equivalent energy output from burning half a ton of coal. Multiplied by the billions of lights blazing up from Earth, the cost of energy we use to light up the night is colossal. While lighting is needed, there are some simple things we can do to ensure that it's neighborhood friendly, energy efficient, and helps preserve dark skies. We can replace light fixtures that send light up to the sky with ones that direct light down, exactly where we want it. They're called fully shielded fixtures. We can also illuminate only the places that need it. And of course, we can just turn off unnecessary lights. These are smart ways to use lighting. They offer simple solutions to problems caused by light pollution. We have a choice between wasting resources by sending light to the sky or learning to use light more responsibly. Light pollution is a problem each of us can help solve. Together, we can bring back the dark of night to planet Earth.
A lot of that is probably familiar to you, but I hope you learned some new things, either from the video or from what I have to say. And once again, we'll hold questions till the end. These are the topics that I want to talk about today. The issue, not surprisingly, is about light pollution. A name that you may not have heard is called ALAN, artificial light at night. That's a phrase that's more common outside the United States. The terms are essentially interchangeable. So I probably will use both terms during the course of this talk. We'll talk about why LAN is a problem, what can be done to mitigate LAN or light pollution. We'll talk about a program in place that is intended to protect dark skies, and we'll end up talking about what's the benefit to Montrose and what are some of the challenges and opportunities for Montrose when it comes to protecting dark skies. So this is a time lapse of a simulation of lights in the United States from the late 1950s until essentially today. And light pollution is growing at about 2% a year. And you can see that we're getting to the point where we might not go much longer before there are no dark sky places left anywhere in the United States. Interesting point there is the reason it's so much brighter east of that line at the 100th meridian, that's water. The water in the east, no water in the west, and that's driven where the population is. But in the end, the lights are everywhere. But I thought it was an interesting, considering how important water is to us. We're in a reasonably dark place right now because we're in a dry place, but no water brings its other issues. So we're going to talk about 4 components to LAN. The first one is light trespass. These are lights that might be along a sidewalk, along a street, perhaps even your neighbor's light. And the light goes where it's not really wanted. It shines in rooms, it shines in bedrooms. Some of these examples are public street lights that happen to light up somebody's house, but it might be your neighbor's light as well. And so this is, light pollution is in one sense a private property rights issue. And that can get kind of interesting at times. Glare. Glare is where the classic example will be driving down a dark highway at night and somebody doesn't dim their headlights, or maybe even they just happen to have a bright set of headlights and it shines in your eyes. Your eyes have adjusted to the dark at night and now they're hit with a bright headlight, and that's called glare. And of course what it does is it prevents you from seeing other vehicles, it prevents you from seeing animals or people on the side, so there's a safety issue there. light clutter, too many lights. Look at all the lights that are in that picture. And all of those lead to some of the other aspects of a land, such as glare, or the last one we want to talk about is sky glow. We saw examples of that in the video. Sky glow is when light that's on the surface, that's unshielded, goes up. It reflects off particles in the sky, and it generates this light dome, we would call. There's an example on the right where we could see the Milky Way in looking away from Berlin, but if you look directly over Berlin, the stars are just washed out because there's so much light in Berlin. The example on the left is a blackout that occurred in the northeastern United States in Canada in 2003. And during the blackout, the Milky Way was quite visible, and the fellow that lived there took that picture, and then when the lights came back on, he went out and took another picture and showed how light pollution has essentially prevented anybody from seeing the stars. Don't confuse sky glow and air glow. Sky glow is a physical phenomenon that happens when particles from space interact with the Earth's atmosphere, particularly around the poles. And you get the colors like this. This was taken by Aaron Watson, who lives in Paonia. He's the chair of Dark Sky, Colorado. This is probably one of the most spectacular images of sky glow that I've ever seen. He took this last winter. So that's not light pollution. That's a natural occurrence right there. The problem is the air glow, like we see here. So what are some of the adverse impacts of LM? There's a whole host of them. Dark skies are not just for astronomers. And we're going to talk real briefly about all of those, and we'll talk a little bit about astronomy. But for the most part, it's going to be some of these others, because those affect all of us, not just geeks like me. Probably the iconic example of light pollution is sea turtles, and that was mentioned in the videos. When the eggs hatch under the sand on the beach, the hatchlings are guided by light. And normally they would head towards the ocean where it's safe because they see the starlight reflecting off the surface of the water. If there happened to be a bright resort there, that's the direction that they're going to go, and they're more susceptible to predators or traffic or things like that. Birds, for the most part, migrate at night. They migrate using the stars and the magnetic field lines of the Earth. Light destroys some of that ability to navigate, and so they end up flying into buildings. They may say, oh, I'm going to land on that pond that I see down below, and it turns out to be a parking lot. Insects are an important part of the food chain. They pollinate all of the plants that we use for food in one form or another. If you don't have pollinators, you don't have food. So this is a kind of an issue that impacts all of us. If there's too much light, bees can't rest at night, they can't pollinate. If there's too much light, the insects are liable to be eaten by bats. They can't pollinate then, and so you've got issues with loss of pollination. Human health, we talked a little bit about driving. If you're driving down the road and somebody has their brights on or even lowered but very bright headlights, it causes glare. But you can get glare from just lights out there. I'm sure you can drive around Montrose and find lots of light that are unshielded that cause glare, and it's discomforting to see that. And it gets worse as our eyes age. Bright lights impact human health, primarily by reducing your ability to have a quality sleep. And we know from medical research that this is primarily related to blue, rich light, like we see on the left-hand side of that picture. In 2016, the American Medical Association released this report talking about LED lights and sleep quality. And what they had determined was we can show that the more blue we have in a light, the more it impacts our body's ability to sleep well, and it's related to melatonin. And that has some associated issues with health. It can lead to a number of diseases like obesity or diabetes. We measure the color of a light with what's called the correlated color temperature, or CCT. And there's sort of the range of CCTs that we see. If it's a blue light, it has a high CCT, say 4,000 or 5,000 degrees Kelvin. If it's more towards the yellow end of the spectrum, it has a lower CCT, say 2,200 or 3,000. So that's a criteria we can use to design lights well. Full disclosure here, there's not full agreement within the scientific community about the importance of CCT alone. There are a number of people that feel that it's more complicated than that. That shouldn't be a surprise. And so we need to work on more research into how do we properly control that blue light. But for the time being, it's CCT. That's the number. Energy and climate change. There is no debate about the fact that LEDs are the right way to go when it comes to lighting. They use significantly less energy than incandescents or high pressure sodium, which are kind of the orangey lights you see around town, or mercury vapor lights, which are blue lights. However, light that goes up is just wasted. We don't need to light up anything in the sky. Astronauts on the space station don't need the lights from the Earth to light up their work. So all those lights that are going up are just wasted energy and wasted money. Upgrading to LEDs is not just a remove and replace activity. It's more complex than that. We'll talk a bit more about why it's more complex and how we deal with it. It's not just energy dollars when it comes to economics. University of Arizona has done a study. They bring in $250 million a year into Arizona because of their astronomy research programs. Researchers that come to the university, they stay at hotels, they rent cars, they eat meals there. It's worth a lot of money to them. Galloway Dark Sky Park in Scotland has shown that if for every euro they spend promoting their dark skies, they get almost €2 back in terms of people coming to that dark sky park and the region around there. For the past number of years, astrotourism has been the fastest growing activity for the western U.S. national parks. So there's economics here that can be a benefit to us, but that's a double-edged sword that I'll get to. This is probably the most contentious topic that I'll mention today, and right off the bat, it's a myth that more lighting is safer. There have been no scientific studies shown that provide any evidence that increased lighting will reduce crime or make it safer. Here's an example over there where this looks like this is a nice bright light in someone's backyard. You feel all safe. And then when you hide the glare, what you find out is there's actually somebody over there in the shadows. Here's another example. They've done a number of studies to show that no matter what they do with the street lights, whether they make them brighter, make them dimmer, turn them off, there's no change in the safety of traffic in that area. You might think you're walking down this pathway at night, it looks nice and safe, you don't see anybody there, but it's the issue of glare again. And of course what we find out is that people that have nefarious ideas in mind are going to hide in the shadows because they know the shadows are there. There's a study done in Australia where they picked out 80 hot spots that appeared to be increased crime, and they interviewed the people that either used those places, and what they found was, particularly for women, that they said, I don't feel safe here because it's so bright. I don't feel like I can hide anywhere if something was going to come along. So once again, Well-designed lighting is what is safer. Night sky heritage. For thousands of years, we've lived in an environment with very dark skies. Only in the last 100+ years, since the invention of electricity, have we begun to generate lights that destroy the night sky for us. Van Gogh painted Starry Nights in France. The area where he painted it, Saint-Remy, you can't see the Milky Way anymore, much less stars. You think he would have been energized to paint Starry Nights if he couldn't see the stars? This is a wonderful painting. Another video, this is from a group called San Luis Valley Greater Outdoors, SLV Go. And it's kind of the agricultural view of dark skies.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Cleve Simpson. I'm the general manager of the Rio Grande Water Conservation District. I'm also the fourth generation of my family to farm and ranch here in the San Luis Valley. You know, having been born here and raised here, maybe at times you take for granted some of the unique opportunities that exist here, that the natural wonder of this place, seeing the Milky Way and the Big Dipper and planets, Mercury and Venus on a regular basis. I encourage the community to join me in support of assisting the San Luis Valley Great Outdoors and the Sangre de Cristo National Heritage Area in support of dark sky designation for southern Colorado.
Hi, my name is Kyler Brown. We're here about 5 miles north of Monte Vista, Colorado in the beautiful San Luis Valley. I farm with my wife and my 2 kids. Her family has a centennial farm here. The San Luis Valley is a really special place because it's a big alpine valley set at 7,500 feet in elevation, ringed by mountains. It's not only a real bastion for an agricultural community, but it's just a real bastion for nature and obviously then dark skies.
We should really seek to inspire, the younger generation. Having my grandson out and bringing him out after dark and sitting on a bale of hay with me, looking at the stars in the sky is a pretty amazing opportunity.
And I don't know how many times we've pulled our sleeping bags out on the lawn and looked at the night sky just in our yard or set up a tent in the yard. I mean, those kind of experiences, I think, they'll carry with them the rest of their life.
When we bale hay, it's routinely at night and you're trying to wait for the conditions to get just right. So historically I come out at midnight or something and it's a little dry, so you're waiting for the moisture to roll in. So routinely find myself laying on a bale of hay, just looking up at the sky and the wonder of it all and the phenomenon of what a unique place we live in.
I remember one of my first experiences coming west was just the border between Colorado and New Mexico, just on the southern end of the valley, and got to watch a meteor shower at 2 in the morning, and man, I just thought it was like raining shooting stars. I mean, it was just gorgeous. There's a host of things we think about when we think about our resource base, and oftentimes I don't think we do look up and think about the sky. I hope we don't take it for granted and really count our sky as something beautiful and a real resource for us to enjoy for many years to come.
We have such a unique history of coming together and really trying to identify and protect valuable resources to us. Water comes to mind as we've spent decades, as a community galvanizing together to protect really important water resources. Here's another opportunity. The community can come together and help foster support for a dark sky initiative.
I think a lot of it is just being mindful of the way we develop the valley, mindful of the way we recreate in the valley, how we use the space.
And there are things people can do, how lights are constructed, how they direct their intensity and more downward. There are things we can do really to protect that resource we have available to us. To learn more about the Sangre de Cristo Dark Sky Initiative and about what you can do to protect the night sky, visit www.slvgo.com. This video was a collaborative project brought to you by the San Luis Valley Great Outdoors and the Sangre de Cristo National Heritage.
So what can be done about mitigating LAN or light pollution? I want to point out, lighting is not bad. It's the misuse of lighting, and that applies to a lot of new technologies. The technology itself is not the problem. It's how we use that technology. These are the 5 principles of responsible outdoor lighting that have been developed by Dark Sky International, formerly known as International Dark Sky Association. We're going to talk about those in a little bit more detail. The first one is that you only need to use, a light needs to have a purpose. Just turning a light on isn't necessarily a purpose. So here's a house on the front. They tuck their porch light underneath the eaves, and it lights the porch and the door and the sidewalk coming up to that. And that's all the light they've got. Whereas on the bottom, you've got a case where there's lights that are unshielded, probably have a lot of glare associated with them, going a lot of different directions. So light should have a clear purpose. Light should be directed only where it's needed. These are the different examples of how lights can be designed. Light that goes up, as we talked about, is just wasted energy, and it tends to lead to glare too. We can begin to shield lights, but if it goes up, it's still not great. This is called fully shielded, where all of the light goes down. That's pretty good. This is called full cutoff shielding, and that's really the best because it helps reduce glare. And there's an example on the bottom where an unshielded light is on the front of a garage, and then they went ahead and put a simple shield on it. And now you can see that the light is still where you need it, on the ground and in front of the doors, but there's no glare really associated with it. What we learned when it comes to LED technology has to do with what are called lumens. That's a measure of brightness. When you turn a light on, power goes into the fixture, and we measure power in terms of watts. And that used to be the way we always thought about lights, was with watts. The power goes in, but it comes out as lumens. That's just a measure of the brightness of the light. And what we're finding, particularly with LEDs, is that lumens are more important than watts. An example here is, here's an unshielded street light on the left-hand side, where the light goes all different directions, and perhaps it has enough, a certain amount of lumens that are coming out, but a lot of those lumens are wasted. On the right-hand side is a typical street light, LED street light. You see these all over the place. Lots of different manufacturers. They tend to all look the same way. And it's putting the same amount of lumens, but it's all going down. Well, in fact, that's so much light that, in fact, we can reduce the number of lumens from that particular fixture. And now we've got the same amount of light on the ground that we had before from that unshielded, but we've reduced the number of lumens, therefore we've reduced the number of energy, and we're saving money. So we need to think more about lumens rather than watts. And I've got a few words. We'll get into lumens a bit more. Light should only be used when it's useful. And we use what's called adaptive controls when we're talking about how we control lights this way. Motion sensors, timers, auto-dimming functions. Motion sensors can be a good answer inside the city. As you get out into the suburbs or into the country where there's lots of wildlife, my motion sensors may not be the right answer. But then you can go to timers. You can say, I'll turn my lights on at sunset, and I'll turn them off at 11 or 12 at night when I don't need them anymore. Auto dimming function is something that we see coming with street lights that I think is a really creative approach. What it does is it turns the lights on to say 90% of full illumination at sunset, and at midnight it gets turned down to say 60 or even 40% of full illumination, and it's left that way the rest of the night. So now you've saved more money, you've extended the life of the LED, so you've saved money that way. And all it took was a simple little attachment on the LED that that dims the light automatically. Tucson does this with all their lights. They dim from 90% of full power at sunset down to 60% of full power at midnight. And they've seen no complaints from drivers about, oh, it's not bright enough at night anymore. They've had no complaints about that at all. But they save a lot of money because they have a lot of lights. Limit the amount of blue light that comes out. And as I mentioned before, we use correlated color temperature to do this. There's a selection of different lights across the spectrum of CCT from something just under 2,000 all the way up to 10,000. And it's the light at the right end where there's lots and lots of blue light in it. So the AMA and lots and lots of lighting ordinances are saying you should stay below 3,000 K. And this is not coming from astronomers or medical people or anything like that. It's also coming from the Illuminating Engineering Society. That's the professional society for people who do lighting for a living. You know, they understand lighting well. They design lights. They install lights. So they're on board with this idea too. So you decided you want to buy a fixture and a bulb to help protect dark skies. What do? Well, the way to use is to go with Dark Sky International's dark sky approved fixtures. And the website is down at the bottom, but I'll have it on the last page, as I mentioned. And there's hundreds of companies and products on there that have all gone through a process where they go to Dark Sky International and they say, I've got an LED or I've got a fixture or whatever that I think meets your criteria for being dark sky friendly. And Dark Sky International will review it, and if they like it, they'll put it on their list. And you should rely on that database rather than relying on marketing or advertisers. I know that there are companies or products out there that are labeled as dark sky friendly, and I can look at them and tell you they're not. So don't rely on what you see on the internet. Use the database from Dark Sky International because you know that's an independent and robust process for approving lights. You have to go down and buy a light bulb. Lighting labels have to include all this information, including the lumens and the CCT. We talked about pick a light that's less than 3,000 K if you can. There are very few applications at the residential level where you need anything brighter than 400 lumens. 1,200 lumens is really, really bright at the residential level. So if you're kind of curious about what kind of light you pick, you know, try a 400, maybe a 600. But you can also go on the internet, and if you just look up residential lighting levels, and you can get some guidance on how many lumens should I be buying bulbs. So how do we protect these dark skies? This is a process. I'm going to take a quick break. Excuse me. This is a process from Dark Sky International where if an entity wants to become recognized as a place that protects dark skies, they submit an application to Dark Sky International. Dark Sky International reviews that, and there's some back and forth and dialogue. And in the end, if Dark Sky International thinks that they met the criteria, then that entity is designated as a dark sky place. And there are several categories of dark sky places: sanctuaries, reserves, parks, communities, urban night sky, and a new one that's about 5 weeks old is dark sky lodging. So if you've got a resort somewhere that says, I'm interested in making money on dark skies, I will put a resort together here that invites people to come and enjoy the dark skies that we would have here. And the lodge, will put in place facilities and programs and everything else intended to protect dark skies. There's only one in the world right now. It's near Grand Canyon, but you'll probably see more of these. There are 10 dark sky parks in Colorado, and there are 5 dark sky communities. in Colorado. So how do you go about preparing this application? Well, obviously, one of the things that you have to do is tell Dark Sky International how bright, how dark are our skies. And there's a number of different ways we can use to measure dark skies. This is probably the most common one. It's called the sky quality meter. And you point it at the sky and you push the button. And you wait a few seconds. And it'll come up with the reading, 10.28. Dark skies are 20 and above. Fairly dark skies would be 19 to 20. We're here in this lit room, that was a 10. So the higher the number, the darker the skies. I have an observatory. My observatory on the outskirts of Montrose to the southeast has readings in the upper 20s. Black Canyon of the Gunnison is in the mid-21s. Top of the Pines above Ridgeway, which is one of the darkest places I know in Colorado, it regularly gets readings in the high 21s or even over 22. If you're a town or a city that wants to become a dark sky place, the single most important thing you have to have in place is a robust lighting ordinance. That's just a screenshot of the first few lines of the Montrose lighting ordinance, and we're going to talk more about that. But you must have a lighting ordinance that Dark Sky International likes, that incorporates all of the things that we've been talking about up to this point. Here are the 15 places in Colorado that are dark sky places. The communities tend to be all over here. So it's Nattavita and Nucla. They're designated together. Norwood, Ridgeway, Crestone, the San Luis Valley, and West Cliff, Silver Cliff. West Cliff, Silver Cliff have a joint designation. They were the first dark sky community in Colorado. The others are dark sky parks, such as Black Canyon. Black Canyon National Park was the first dark sky park in Colorado. That was designated in 2015. But there's Great Sand Dunes, Mesa Bird, Hub and Wheat, Dinosaur, Jackson Lake State Park out in the Plains, Florissant. There's 10 of those in Colorado. So what are the challenges to Montrose to becoming a dark sky place? I've got 3 that I want to talk about. If Elon Musk were to come tomorrow and say, I'll write you a check for $10 million to become a dark sky place, but you have to spend it all by the end of 2024. That would be a pretty tall order and probably impossible. If Stingy Joe came to Montrose and said, I'll give you 10 years to become a dark sky place, but you can't spend anything on it. That's just about as impossible as well. So time and money, cost and schedule to a project engineer are both key to accomplishing anything, including becoming a dark sky place. But the third one that's really important will be vision. And that's where you all come in. I used to call this political will, but that tends to shift the burden all to the city council and city administration. This is a partnership. And if we don't have vision as a community, we'll never make our skies darker. I don't know if Montrose will ever become a dark sky place, but we can become a place where the skies are darker. What happens if we don't do anything about lighting in the city and in the county? Growth will occur here. We've seen it in the past, we've seen it in the last few years. Growth will occur here, and along with that comes lighting. The lighting is uncontrolled. It's going to get brighter here. And probably what could happen from that is the Black Canyon and Gunnison could lose their designation as a dark sky park. There's lots of dark sky parks even in Colorado. If somebody's interested in astrotourism and we lose our designation at the Black Canyon, they'll find somebody, a place else to go, and their money goes with them. So there is a clear economic disadvantage to letting the skies get brighter here. So we're doing some things right here in Montrose, I think. That should be mentioned. They've just announced a 4-year streetlight upgrade program. It's going to cost about $110,000 for each of the 4 years. They will replace 1,500 of the streetlights in Montrose with shielded lights. They've already replaced they have a little under 2,000 total. A lot of them have already been replaced. But they'll be replacing, or even, in some cases, replacing existing LED lights with better ones. All of the lights in the future in Montrose will be fully shielded. Lights on what they call major arterials, which is essentially Townsend, Maine, east of Townsend, out Highway 50, and the San Juan bypass will be 4,000 K lights. A lot of the lights in Montrose are now 5,000 or 6,000. You can tell because they're so blue and they're so bright. So they'll be putting in 4,000 K lights. It's not 3,000, but it's better than 5,000. Lights along minor arterials, which is like Niagara, Oak Grove, all of the lights on there that are in that kind of, or streets that are kind of the orange color, will get slightly lower power, but they'll also be 4,000 K lights. All of the green streets on there, which are residential, will get one of two kinds of lights. There'll be either a residential light, it will be 3,000 K, be fully shielded, fully compliant with dark sky criteria. In certain areas, they will put in what are called residential decorative lights, which are fully shielded, and they're 2,200 K. They'll have the very yellow color to it. That's an example of one of the decorative lights. That's right at the entrance to Remington's. But if you go through any of the new subdivisions in Montrose, like Woods Crossing, that's the kind of lights that you see being put in. They're fully shielded, the light all goes down, they're LEDs, they save energy. Excuse me. And there's no glass or plastic lens on it. It gets frosty over time and reflects the light up. So even as the light ages, it still is only going to go down. The other thing that my experience is the city values input from the community. I presented to the city council a few weeks ago on essentially the same topic. I believe that the city council right now understands dark skies. They have competing priorities. That's the way life is these days. But at least they're interested in hearing about dark skies and what we can do about it. And I'll say more about one of the things they're going to do. So I think you should thank the city officials. That may not sit well with some people, but I think the city council should be thanked for the lighting program. So what do we need to do to improve? We're not perfect. There are lots of ways we can improve. Update the lighting ordinance. I mentioned that if you want to be a dark sky place, you have to have a robust lighting ordinance in place. That's in the works, and they've asked me to participate in that effort. And we'll see how many of the dark sky concepts get incorporated into the city ordinance. Again, it's an issue of balance, but I think they're open to doing things. I know we can make the lighting ordinance better. The existing ordinance is 10 years old. It was good at the time it was written. Lighting's changed a lot in 10 years, and it's time to bring the ordinance up to speed with that. We need to develop an effective process for complying with ordinances. This is a tough one. It doesn't mean hiring 30 enforcement officers. We can't afford that, and I'm not sure that they would be effective. Enforcement of ordinances is probably something that a lot of people are concerned about in Montrose, and it's not just lighting ordinances. There's all kinds of examples: exhaust, safety, all kinds of things going on around enforcement. This is a tough one, and that's why I don't say hire 30 enforcement officials. We need to be more creative, and we need to think outside the box on this, on what an effective process means when it comes to complying with ordinances. Right now, one way that you can do it is to use a Better Montrose. That's a website where you can go on, and you're essentially the eyes of the city to say, Somebody's got a lot of trash in their yard. Somebody's got a light shining into my bedroom. Somebody's got one of these electronic signs out in front that's really, really bright. The city listens to Better Montrose. They may not listen as fast as you would like, but they do listen. In partnership with that, there has to be community-driven input to the city. This is a democracy. If we don't tell them what we want, as a people, they're not inclined to do anything. That's the way a democracy works. And they're open to that input, but then the responsibility is on us to say, we need you to work harder on dark skies, or we need you to work harder on paving, or whatever it happens to be. The last one that I've got there is something kind of very specific, and I would like to see the city install auto dimming function on some of the minor arterials like Niagara as part of their lighting upgrade project. They don't necessarily have to do all of them, but maybe they pick 20 of them. They say, let's see what it takes. What are the benefits in terms of save money, extended fixture life, and reduced lighting by putting auto dimming in on some of these arterials. Maybe someday we'll even do it for Townsend and East Main. So here's my vision, that Montrose is darker in 5 years than they are tonight. And how are we going to measure that? Well, this is called the light pollution map. And it's a simulation based on satellite images of what the ground looks like. That's Montrose from the 2022 VIIRS satellite data. So in 5 years, when we get another set of data from the VIIRS satellite, our little circle there gets smaller or darker, then we've met my vision. So we have a way to measure how we're doing. It just takes a little bit of time. But by then, the new street lighting project will have been implemented, and maybe some other steps as well. So that's all I have to say. Thanks for your time. I'll answer any questions that you've got if my voice holds out. If you want those websites, you can come up and do a screenshot of the QR code, or you can come up and I have a printout of it as well.
How about a round of applause?